Welcome, everyone. We're delighted to begin a brief, maybe 40-minute session with you. We're going to be talking about the implementation of inclusion. We hope we'll be able to answer some of the questions you may have today as you are growing and implementing your own inclusive practices. We are joined by Julia Martin. She's for special education in San Francisco Unified School District. She's a fountain of information and resources. You're going to enjoy her very much. She's going to begin with an introduction to give us a context of where they are within San Francisco and their origin story, as she calls it. And then I'll take a few minutes and talk to you about the issues that I see that inclusive schools are needing to address now and in the future as we improve our practice. And then we'll return back to Julia for a closure. So, Julia, I'm going to let you take it away.
Thank you so much, Frances. It is incredibly exciting to be here with the Inclusive Schools Network. I've followed you all from afar for a very long time, and this work has made a profound impact on the life of our family. We will go to the next slide, please. And I'll share just some of the beautiful pictures from our decade of celebration of Inclusive Schools Week in San Francisco. It is something we take to heart. Looking back through pictures, folks are hugging events because it is about kindness and inclusion of all students in all ways. And we really believe in it and are really authentically excited about Inclusive Schools Week. And when I say we, it is our district leadership, our district staff, and our families and community. I think new principals coming in, oh, what's that Inclusive Schools Week? We don't have to do that. And the families will call up and say, what's our plan? What are you doing? So it really is a time when everybody comes together. I'll talk a little bit about how we pulled this whole thing off. So if we'll go to the next slide. We have been doing this work with the help of Stetson, who's part of our origin story, since the early 2010s, 2010s, so 2013, 2014, and we were really lucky to work with Stetson and our guiding principles on inclusive education. There's a Board of Education resolution, and Frances, I asked you if you wanted to say something about your work there on that resolution, because it really was a highlight.
Oh, good. Thank you. The first things that we did when we entered San Francisco Unified Schools, at their invitation to kickstart their inclusive practices, was to inquire of the engagement, which is very important, of their school board. And the school board had, as many of us recognize with our own school boards, had questions. They were excited about it. They were all in. What was beautiful about this document that we're able to share with you, the guiding principles regarding inclusive education practices, is that we asked the board members individually to share their thoughts about what should be a guiding principle for the district with regard to inclusive practices. And the document that you have access to here is really a beautiful document. There are about 6 or 7 statements that came truly from the individual board members that were serving at that time. And I particularly appreciated the first one that reminds everyone that inclusive practices is not a solo event, that it is part of the restructuring of a good school district so that we include all students and have shared ownership for all students. So that first statement says it's not a special ed initiative. It is a district-wide initiative. And as you look through the various statements around principles, they're really well done. And back in those days, you often heard this statement a lot, and it's included in this document. And it said that, reminding us that children receiving special education services are not special education students. They are general ed students along with their peers who happen to be receiving special ed services. And I remember at the time, and now I can talk about other districts who have more recently adopted their own set of guiding principles, is that one of the things that delighted me is that when we would go out into the schools, the principal or the teachers or sometimes the parents would say, we have these guiding principles from our school board and they're posted on our website. And this is what we believe in our district. And it really is a strategy that moves a district forward much more quickly because you have a public statement of commitment to inclusive education and a very clear description of what those guiding principles are. So, for those of you who may not have done this yet, this is a really great way to get your board on record as supporting it and defining it even further for your district. So, I highly recommend it. And Julia's got some more fabulous ideas to share with you through their origin story. But that was one of the very beginnings of the first activities within San Francisco.
Well, and I really want to thank you, Frances. And one of the powers that we have found in having that Board of Education resolution is a lot that's happened since the time that we wrote, or you all wrote the resolution. I wasn't on staff at that time. We have new superintendents and new board members, but our parent advisory committee for special education, every time they present before the Board of Education, they remind them that as a district, we have a commitment to inclusion.
Beautiful.
And so it is such a powerful tool. They took that resolution into their meeting with the superintendent just a few weeks ago as a reminder of the power of it. So it is very powerful. We also, at the time we were doing that work in the district, we also got a proclamation from the city of San Francisco to name the week Inclusive Week in the city of San Francisco. And we've been really lucky to have a strong partnership over the years with our city. And when we first started, we had done the big resolution, we had the proclamation. These pictures here are actually the big rallies and events that we held at City Hall in San Francisco. And we had all sorts of, we had an inclusive marching band come, we had inclusive cheerleaders, we had Special Olympics events, and we had speaker assemblies. It was incredible. But the one thing that we were missing was our schools. So we loved the big event, but we realized it was mainly our central office staff. And we wanted to get this big momentum that we had behind Inclusive Schools Week into our school sites. So we made a little shift. And if you can go to the next slide, please. We started bringing it into the schools and bringing the students in, and that really made some changes. One of the things we did was an inclusive art showcase, and students all around the district submitted art, many of which we use today because it's just beautiful. I love the little globe with the students holding hands saying better together. Some of it was really powerful. And we have linked here that website, and we'll talk about it a little bit later. But we really shifted our focus to our students. If you can go to the next slide. And we shifted our celebrations as well to our students. And then we really started to see some amazing things. So the little boy in the top left is at an elementary school that did a whole wall of kindness where people, this was similar to something that had been done at the time. I think it was 2018, 2019, that had been done in New York City subways, where were putting up stickies for kindness. So they thought that was such a great idea. That was their activity at their school, was to do this kindness gratitude wall. And then at the bottom, many of our schools are doing social media takeovers. So we see our students in our special day classes are taking over social media accounts for a school. So that's some of what we saw here. And then lots and lots of assemblies and basketball game, unified sporting activities. So basketball, soccer, all sorts of activities that have become really powerful. And again, are not just for one class or one group of students, but they are whole school-wide events, which become very, very powerful. So next slide, please. So what we really wanted to show is how do we do this huge, huge thing? And it is top down of having that resolution, having our superintendent, having our leadership. Those discussions happen really in the spring and summer when we talk about, okay, we're doing Inclusive Schools Week. We get it on the calendar in the spring, talk about it. We have letters prepped and information prepped usually in August, get that information out. But it's really about everyone in our district taking ownership. It's not a special ed event. It's just an event that all folks take part of. So our central office departments, our school sites, many of them that have really big, extensive events, they start that planning in spring and summer. Our families, so families are always asking teachers and school sites, what are you doing? What can I do? How can I partner with you? on this. And then our community partners. We have a number of organizations in the city that really want to be part of it. And here are some pictures from past events or past superintendent doing a little welcome video. That was such a great video. We actually recycled it and used it this year because it was just, he did such a great job talking about the importance of what it is for us. But we partner with the 49ers. We partner with Special Olympics. So there's no limit to who you can partner with in your community to put this kind of event together. And once you're partnering, then your media message is getting out, not just to your families, but people all over the community. It all happens through the project plan. I'm happy if districts are interested to share my actual plan. Right now, it's just Google Sheets, but different tabs. I keep a running list of events, which is really useful when I'm doing my recap and pulling things together and when I'm getting updates for the board or district staff. I have a list of community speakers. People say, well, we want to have a speaker come in on autism or ADHD or Tourette's. So I have a list of folks that will happily come into schools. We hand deliver our Inclusive Schools Week posters. We tried many different things. And what we ended up doing is working with our parent advisory members. And we have a group called Support for Families of Children with Disabilities. They're our Family Empowerment Center. And so we get volunteers from both of those groups to hand deliver posters to our 130 plus school sites. And so it makes a huge difference. Parents being involved, volunteers being involved, and seeing what's going on and seeing all the bulletin boards in the school sites. And the school sites feel a little taken care of and they feel special and they await the posters every year. They know they're coming and they're always excited to get them. And then we have a really extensive communication plan. So if we go to the next slide, I will show you. People say, how do you find out about this? And for us, it's a checklist. I linked a couple of things so you could see them, but it's getting information into every newsletter, every community group, every central office update, every announcement, anywhere that we can think of. So folks really get flooded. Everybody knows this week is Inclusive Schools Week. We are lucky. Our communications department really feels passionately about this event. And so they're coming to meetings and preparing. They're wanting to know, what are you doing? What are you highlighting? It is one of their favorite events of the year to promote and present. So they're always coming to us and writing the press releases. And again, some of our groups, Parents for Public Schools, for instance, their San Francisco chapter has worked with us, and they always write an article about what's important about that week. And so they'll reach out and say, okay, we have our article ready. So we have a nice collaboration. And so I wanted to share this whole list of, this is what it looks like. This is how we're getting the word out. And then there's also, we have a Twitter handle and all of those hashtags and all those things as well. And then it will go to the next one. So that's the nitty gritty there of what we do. Then we really, really make sure people know that it is not the job of special education teachers to organize Inclusive Schools Week. It is also not the job of our special education parents to organize it, right? This is a school-wide community event. Yes, we have special ed teachers that are the ones that lead it at their schools. We absolutely have families, but we do not expect or put that on those individuals. So we really do look at what are tools our central team can offer. And so we have ability awareness and inclusion resources that are orientation and mobility and related service provider or low incidence providers put together about working with AAC devices and some great information. So we shared that here. It's public. Again, those community partners. And then our families and our students, they love videos. Our teachers love videos. Everybody loves a good video. So because we've been doing this for a while now, we have a great list of videos, and we just created a YouTube channel. We put them all in one place. So it's just a library of all the videos we've used over time, and people can go in there and pick something that resonates for them and for their students. And there's some serious ones and there's some funny ones, and you're likely to find something you can use. We have a resource guide. So if looking through all the slides is too much, go to the resource guide. A lot of our teachers use it. Our curriculum teams have looked at it to include some lesson plans and guidance on working with students. Families use it. It's got lots of great stuff. Our librarians, I'll talk about in a minute. They put together some great things in visual and performing arts and physical education. And the reason these three groups really are able to do so much is they get specialized funding from the city. So we have a public education enrichment fund. And so some of those funding goes to these groups that really support inclusion. So I think our next slide has some information about the librarians and just some of the beautiful books that they chose. And we'll be recording a video with our librarians later this week, really talking about this process. And, they said, oh, this is nothing. This is just what librarians do. It's not always what librarians do. It wasn't what was in my child's library. I used to go to the public library and bring books in because I wanted something about the disability experience in our school, and it wasn't there. And I remember the first time doing it, having our school librarian agree to read some of the books, and she read a book about a student that had two dads, and there was a little guy in the room, and that's my dad's. That's my family. My family's that. And for my son to see a book on autism, like, wow, other kids, it was a big deal. And so our librarians have really just done an incredible job making sure that our students have access to really beautiful books. And they also make sure that a lot of the books are available for read alouds so that all folks can get them, right? All manners of learning. So next slide, I want to show you what our arts teachers do. Because, it's just the arts teachers, so they make it beautiful. Beautiful newsletter. I've linked a couple of them here. But they really have done an incredible job with thinking about how they make arts education inclusive. They are working, we have a group in San Francisco called Creativity Explored. It's an amazing art nonprofit that works with adults with disability to create art. And so tomorrow, actually, our arts teacher, their event for Inclusive Schools Week is to go in and have a training with Creativity Explored about how to create art and inclusive lesson plans for individuals with disabilities to really just think about their practice. I really encourage you to check out some of the stuff they're doing. It's gorgeous. But that, again, that's not me. That is our arts teachers really just doing what they do. And then another group that we really like is Special Olympics. Our physical education department and Special Olympics of Northern California have a really strong partnership. And Special Olympics every year since we started this work has been our partners in this celebration of Inclusive Schools Week. They share out respect banners to school. They share out posters to school. They hold athlete speaker events and live streams. And then they provide inclusive lesson plans. And again, those inclusive lesson plans and ability awareness plans are not done by the special education teachers. The physical education department asks every PE teacher in our district to do at least 1 to 2 lessons per week. And in some of our schools, it is those PE teachers that are leading Inclusive Schools Week. So you never know who your allies are going to be in this work. And this group has done some amazing things. So if we go to the next slide, I can show you just a few of the great speakers. They've reached, look at that, so over 10,000, nearly 10,000 students through their lesson plans. And this was just for last year alone. 22 classes got banners. They had 18 assemblies at 10 schools. So every single year, this is year over year over year over a decade, they are cranking this out. And the athlete speakers are really just wonderful. It is really lovely to have the students come in and ask them questions and learn about disability through the lifespan. And for the speakers, it's really a great chance to come back. And many of them are San Francisco alumni, so to come back and be at the schools and show off their medals, because the medals are pretty darn cool. So then we'll go to the next one. So those are the bigger district-wide. And then we have schools that want to do things. And so again, for the schools, we break it down. When we hand out the posters, they all go with this little flyer. You see the PDF of it here. So we make it as easy as we can. All of this stuff goes out electronically to schools in all sorts of different ways. It lives on our website all year long. But in the weeks before, there's always a new principal or somebody who's busy or someone's, oh gosh, what are we going to do? I don't know what to do. And so we just say, here you go. And we give them this flyer, and it's got 6 things to do. Pick one from each category. Do an inclusive morning circle, do a read aloud, and maybe work with your PE department and see what they are doing about those ability awareness events. Because maybe you didn't know, principal, your PE department might be doing this, or your librarian might have books that they're doing. So it's just a way for principals who are really busy to easily access the event and include their school. Again, we have schools that are planning this stuff all year long and are doing incredible things. I just heard from a principal today, they were doing a winter solstice tree and hanging up ornaments that reflected their identity. And so for this particular principal who is a parent of a child with autism, we're putting up an ornament around autism. So there's no limit to what people can do, but it can be as simple as making a bulletin board, and then it just goes. Once people get excited and creative, they really do amazing things. Next one, we'll show you a little bit for our middle schools. It looks a little bit different. There's a little more tech. They tend to like videos. So sometimes we'll have school social workers going around videoing kids, asking them what's inclusion mean to them. Our middle schools, a lot of them have a home room, which is what we call advisory. And so we had a great advisory teacher come up with a slide deck around inclusion and gave us permission to share that with everybody, because that slide deck had some really great grounding, and it was an activity for every week that they would spend 5 minutes on the slide deck and learn a little bit about inclusion. So that's some of the things in middle school. And high school, it changes up a little bit more. We really focus on making sure they get that disability history. We have been really lucky to partner with Longmore Institute. Some inclusive art that's been done through the middle schools has been very powerful. And this year we're doing a big event with our middle school students. So really getting in there with them and doing more introspective work, helping them think about their own identities as individuals with disabilities and how all students feel a sense of belonging in our schools. So that's the nitty gritty we're doing. And then if we go to the next one, we always have a keynote. So all the schools do all their different things, and then there is always a keynote. So this is a sampling of some of the keynotes we've done. We've done film screenings. So Intelligent Lives with Dan Habib was an incredible community film screening. The Kids We Lose, that was another really, really powerful one. San Francisco, we are the birthplace of disability advocacy, and the 504 sit-in, we have members of our Mayor's Office on Disability and our Disability Cultural Center that were participants in that 504 sit-in, had panel discussions with the participants from the sit-in, come in and talk with students. So talk about powerful. We've Lebrecht from Crip Camp come in, because he's just over in Berkeley, the Independent Living Resource Center, come in and talk with folks. We have a partnership with Superfest, which is a disability film festival, films made by and for individuals with disabilities. Very powerful. We've done showings at some of our high schools and district-wide for little schools. So work with us to come up with the right films for our inclusion film museums. Museums will partner with us. And then many, many student summits. We really like a good student summit in this district. We'll do a panel. This year's panel is on inclusion and sense of belonging, and where we're taking the theme of how are they asking the children, how are they doing? What is their vision on inclusion for our future? Where do they see that going? I'm excited for that panel. Those are some of the big things, but the keynote event gets everybody excited and brings together the theme of that particular year. And we have to have a finale with every big event. The keynote, you have to have finale. And our finale, we are very lucky. Again, this isn't something I organize. This is something Accents, which is our 18 to 22-year-old program. Those teachers organize. They all come together and they do a holiday sing-along with all the crazy costumes you can see, all sorts of activities. Our superintendent is always a part of it. And so it'll be next Friday, and I'm going to have to I'm looking for my sparkly shirt and crazy hat. It is just, it's so joyful, and it sells out every year. The mayor comes, it's a big deal. So that is in a nutshell what we do. I will share it is very fun and it's hard. Thank you. Next slide. And there's always more we can do, right? You look at that, and if you haven't done it, you're thinking, oh, wow, I can't ever do that. Yeah, you can. And you start small, just one school at a time, one conversation at a time. Our parents have put together an inclusion site survey they want schools to really think about during the week. Just pledge to add 1 or 2 new ways to be inclusive at your school. And they are looking at, gosh, can we get to perfection? We're humans. We're not going to get to perfection. Life's going to happen. One of my favorite Inclusive Schools Week posters was the rebuilding poster that came out. And I think this was, Frances, was this 2021? Seeing a nod, yes. In 2021, we're coming back from COVID.
Right.
Are we going to do? And it just, yeah, we're rebuilding. And so we actually took that theme literally. And activity that year was building peace corners. So kids were having a hard time. The adults were having, there was a lot. And so it was, okay, we're all going to physically just build a space to calm down in our classrooms. That's what we're going to do this year for inclusive schools.
Yeah. Survive.
Right? We're going to survive.
Yes.
And so now, even today, I go around classrooms and I see peace corners in so many schools and so many classrooms. Right. So you just never know where things are going to go. And we learn, we create posters. Those posters pop up. This is a poster from, I don't know, almost 10 years ago now. I will still see that poster around at school because it resonated for people. And so we see things all around. And Charlotte, if you go to the next slide, please. We did COVID. We had to do, how are we going to do Inclusive Schools Week? And our schools were closed. In San Francisco, we stayed closed for a long time. And so what is that going to look like? We have to do a virtual one. Well, we made a virtual emoji. I learned all about Bitmoji. People made sourdough bread. I made Bitmojis. And we made all sorts of resources. So it'll be in the slides. It's clickable. We made a whole Inclusive Schools Week resource. And our teachers still use these today. I got a slide deck from a teacher this week who's doing a bunch of amazing things. They're actually making quilts and t-shirts and buttons and things that they're going to sell with her classroom. They shared it all with a Bitmoji. So a lot of these resources, you go through something hard and you think, how are we going to do this? And you come up with a creative tool that you can use for a really long time. That gets me just to my final thoughts, which is thank you for keeping the inclusion going, for inspiring all of us. It is a hard time right now. I know our superintendent and our board and our special ed department, it's hard in our district. And so, Frances, I will pass to you, but we do all belong. It is about kindness. It is about inclusion. And for us, that is the only way to move forward, is together. So with that, I'm going to pass to you, Frances. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julia. How fabulous. What an inspiring set of, and what I love is diverse options for celebrating too, because we're a diverse group of people in our country and in our classrooms. So just very, very exciting to see it. And thank you. I would tell you that I'm going to look at my slides now and share them with the group and tell you that one of the things that we really pay attention to in our firm is systems change. And if we've ever had a systems change, it would be inclusive practices, because it's attitudinal, it is how technical, it's what are the strategies and skills that you need. And then, of course, what Julia has so beautifully modeled is it's just that deep down social and economic set of and emotional set of skills, how you bring it all together for your community. So what we thought we would do for the rest of this little session here is we'll bring it back to Julia for a happy closure. But as I look at this year, and I want to underscore what Julia just said, this has been a heck of a year, a challenging year for those of us who so believe in inclusive practices for everyone. It's not just about disability. It's about the whole range of differences that our children bring to schools, our communities, illustrate in our world and in our country. And so, what I thought I would share with you is something that I guess motivates me tremendously. And that is what I think of. People ask me to define inclusion all the time. And I really do think that it starts for me by looking at the word exclusion, what it is not, shutting out, removal from consideration or taking part. And if you think of the children in our schools, who would wish for them exclusion? Who would wish for those adults in our community exclusion? No one. And I've had a career long enough to tell you that my first few years in working at the State Department in Texas is my job was to go to all the schools that had denied access to children with disabilities because they were not ambulatory, they were not verbal. You notice the non, the not, they captured those characteristics. So there were thousands of children in almost every state that were actually at home because schools could deny access. So this word exclusion is very powerful for me. I guess it's been part of my career. And that is when IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, was passed. The thrill of being able to go through my state and educating the superintendents and cabinets and school boards and saying every child has the opportunity, it must have a free and appropriate public education. And so as I was thinking about what we might talk about today and thinking about that powerful word exclusion and then inclusion, I think one of the things that is really important, and you can see my definition here on the screen, is it's really achieved within each individual student's needs. And I want to underline for all of us that word individual. So many people wonder how we implement inclusion. And I tell everyone, if you really pay attention to the individual student needs and make certain that we have the services and the supports that match those needs, then we are inclusive. There's not a giant solution for every child that fits. There are individual solutions. And maybe that's one of the reasons why it's been so difficult to implement over the years or challenging to start with. Once you get that point, it is very, very simple to understand inclusion. But if we're still thinking about, and we'll talk about in a few minutes, the label the child has or the place down the hall, then we find that we're not really implementing successful inclusion. So for our next time together, I have identified a number of what I would call remaining opportunities. I could have called them challenges, but I don't want to. Our firm conducts a number of program evaluations every year in school districts across the country. And we're asked to come in and look at the practices that exist in that school district and in individual classrooms and capture what they're doing really well and the areas that we need to improve. And so for this week of inclusive practices, there's time for a brief presentation on what we still lack. Many of you are doing these things. Congratulations. But if we were to take a helicopter view and say across the country, what are some of the things that we still have to address? These are my top, I think I have 8 or 9 of these I'm going to share with you today. The first one is when we've listened to Julia, how hard they've worked. One of the things that San Francisco is accomplishing with these activities is they are accomplishing a shared definition of inclusion and a shared commitment to it. Now, in some of our schools and we still see, and this is a challenge, a lack of shared ownership for all children. It's still awfully easy to refer a child for special education because we think this child doesn't belong in a general education classroom. And yet we know now that the legislation that's 50 years old today said that you begin with 3 reference points for every child: the general education classroom, the general education neighborhood school the child would attend if not having a disability, and also the general curriculum. So those are very important concepts. So one of the things that I think that San Francisco has really illustrated is a system-wide approach to gaining district-wide ownership for all children. Everyone in San Francisco knows what inclusion means, I dare say. And if they don't, Julia and her team will fix that. but it does impact us dramatically. Sometimes the general ed department is down the hall and doesn't get to meet with the curriculum department, or it does not have a seat at the district's cabinet level. And so Shirley Chisholm, who happened to be a Texas legislator, said, if you don't have a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. So that's my challenge for many of us that still find that sometimes we're down the hall or not in the room. Bring a folding chair, because the minute that we are owned and children with disabilities are owned by every educator in the school, then we really do have successful inclusion. So let's work toward, if it's not present in your district, shared ownership. You'll be able to download the tools that you're going to see in this presentation. So you'll have a copy of this. You won't have to squint and read the small type. You'll have your very own full-size copy. But we wrote some time ago some questions that we use to determine if there is shared ownership in a district or in a school. And so here are some of those questions. I mentioned earlier, is the special ed department way off-site or down the hall? Do faculty members say that they are committed to all children? Do our teachers, special ed, general ed teachers, plan together? That's a critical piece. And do we support transition from level to level? But there's more information for you here. But be thinking, do we truly have we achieved shared ownership for all children? And a big, big practice that is still stuck with us. Once you label something, there's something funny about that. It just sticks with us. We've got the label, like the resource room or the self-contained room or the behavior classroom or the children with visual disabilities. And we come up with these labels. And then if we're not careful, many of our schools are still stuck with, is we look at a child's disability label and we say, oh, you go down the hall to resource, or you go to the life skills classroom. And you can think of all the labels that we've come up with. That is a very important cue that we have stuck with the labels and the places and not what I mentioned earlier, the individual needs of the student. What I need to say is, for this student, what supports does he need to be successful? And then I allocate my staff and my services on the basis of that, not necessarily thinking about a place at all. Those staff and those services can follow the child into the general ed classroom. For most students, that is the most appropriate for the full school day. Because I do believe in individualizing, I would say that for a very small percentage of students, there may be a rationale that for a part of their school day, they may need to have some instruction in specialized skills that they truly need. For example, my field, I taught children who were blind or partially sighted. Now, if I wanted to teach Braille, I suppose I could have done that in a general ed class, but I'd like to have had a quiet environment where the student could really focus on Braille instruction. And so I might borrow them. It was always hard to decide when to borrow them because they were always going to miss something important. But if they really needed those Braille skills, I would take them in my office or down the hall. We'd sit in the hallways, and just a intensive time for instruction. But now let me tell you that I have been an advocate of inclusive practices all my career. So I don't want those few examples to stimulate thought, oh, well, yes, they could go down the hall. Our first question that IDEA told us to start with was, what are the needs of the students and what can we make successful inside the general ed classroom? And we are getting smarter and smarter by the day in being able to check the box and make that possible within the general education classroom. So as long as it's individually determined and we really have that preference for the general ed classroom, we are an inclusive school. Now, I've given you a tool that you'll be able to download, but it talks about the difference between a program-centered service, where we really start by the presumption that there's low expectations, and maybe ultimately when we take them out of that classroom, they have fewer appropriate role models. There are all these kinds of characteristics that are problematic, versus that individualized student support decisions, where the presumption is that the general ed classroom is the appropriate place, until proven very different. And our decisions should rest on strengths. You'll read this for yourself when you download these tools, but it's very helpful to draw the distinction, because if I were to helicopter view, I'm still seeing that we hung on to the label or the place name, and that is how we start making decisions for what services a child gets, which is upside down, looking at the student's need and not the label or the place. I've often heard, if you've met one child with a visual disability or along the autism spectrum, you've met one child, because every child is so different. So those labels and those place names are not that helpful to us. Yesterday's continuum looked like that. There's some in-class support and a lot of pullout with all those fancy names. Well, I want to suggest another continuum. For nuts and bolts, let's really talk about this. I want to remind myself that in the general ed classroom, that we should have the best quality instructional strategies, that we should have good instruction, and that if something might be needed outside of, now notice that I'm talking about advanced support, we may have materials developed for the general ed class in advance of instruction. So the child in the general ed class has all the supports they need. They don't need to come out for certain accommodations or modifications. Those can be provided in class and advance, and also in class support, like collaborative teaching or support facilitation. And for those very rare and few things, might they need some time outside of the general class. Now, there's another thing I'm concerned about, and that is the notion that if we're not careful, a child can be identified as eligible for and in need of special education, and we fail to notice that they can actually exit special education services, that children can be so successful that they no longer require special ed services. And I've discovered that there's a problem with this now in our schools. We often think of it as a lifetime decision and don't revisit that decision. Or I've also noticed that we're not collecting data on the number of students we actually exit from special education. Wow, we need to collect that data. If it's zero, we're in trouble. We should be able to see the majority, many of our youngsters can exit special ed because they successfully know how to use the accommodations or modifications that they need. And let's be really careful. Referral cannot be an on-ramp to special ed. Often, if there's a referral for a child that's struggling, we need to think what we can change in the general ed classroom. And we have to be really careful that we don't just pre-assume that if we refer this child, they're going to go down the hall, because that's not inclusive practices. So those old assumptions still exist with us. So there's are my two criteria. They're not mine, they're ours nationally. But the child must have a disability and also must be in need of specially designed instruction. And you can have a disability and still not need that specially designed instruction because of the strategies that you have in place. There are a number of negative impacts for children who then are identified needing special ed. I believe we're moving to a place where, as we identify children appropriately and not over-identify, and they get the appropriate services, then we're really looking at solid success for that youngster. But if we're identifying a child inappropriately, then we can just plan on appearing throughout their school career that result in often bullying and mistreatment. So it's not a light decision to be made. The other piece is very important, and that is that we have to remember that there has to be Tier 1 instruction, research-based, quality instruction available for every single. You look at the response to intervention models that we have in every school district. Tier 1 instruction must be there for every child. For example, here are a few of them. There's many, many strategies that are important, but these are some that we know to be important in every class. Clear learning objectives. What am I learning? What are my learner objectives? High expectations, not low. Differentiating instruction. Are we teaching every child the exact same way, all of them at once? Strategies are really centered around whole group instruction. We have scaffolds like accommodations for every child, attention to student engagement, flexible grouping, positive behavioral supports. How many youngsters end up being referred for special education because of a behavior issue that could have proactively and preventatively been avoided had we had positive behavioral supports in a classroom. And we have to really practice and be careful that we use academic learning time well. One of the things that I use here, and it's I think, an emotional statement. I read something at some point that said that no child should be found eligible for special education on the basis of poor instruction in the general education classroom. Wow, powerful words. Looking at that list I just showed you, are those strategies in place? Are the curriculum people integrated with the special ed staff? Are special ed staff trained in the general curriculum? Sometimes I wonder when I go into a school district, what happened to Tier 1 at all? You don't see it. And if we don't see it, we're jeopardizing every child in the school. So that's why Tier 1 is so important. Now, in this format, there's something helpful about this. If this is my definition of inclusive practices, remember, starting with the assumption that the child may need nothing, or some of what he may need would be obviously available in the general class with everyone else. But when we identify any child, here's a great sequence of questions. First of all, can that student participate in the activities in the general ed class just exactly as they're designed for everyone else? Perfect. Stop right there. If not, well, wait a minute. Are we missing any of those Tier 1 strategies? If we are, those need to be added to that general ed classroom. Now, here's the thing. I personally am a very visual learner. If I don't have graphic organizers to help me understand complex operations, I'm not going to learn them nearly as effectively or as efficiently. So Frances needs an accommodation. No problem. Every child, almost every child, needs some kind of an accommodation. What should it be? Do we provide it once we define it? Are they in place for the child? Assistive technology, but any one of these steps along the way. We should answer for children who are struggling, and those who are gifted, and those who are just having a great school year. We need to ask these questions of ourselves from an instructional and behavioral point of view. So you would only get to a curricular modification at the very end of all of that list. And that's when you change not how the child is learning, but what they're learning, and only very carefully and respectfully. So then, and then only do you decide what kind of support is needed, not to start with. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. But this, I call this my keep myself honest form. I stay honest to the needs of the child and the benefit of recognizing that's a general ed student who may need some supports. And what are they? And are they provided? Now, one of the things that frustrated over, in 1997, there was a reauthorization of IDEA, and it said that children with disabilities shall have access to and the opportunity to progress in the general curriculum. Not some silly curriculum down the hall, a busy bee thing, a puzzle. We have puzzle time, and then we have computer time. But the general ed classroom must be the reference point for every child. If we don't do that, the chances of that child returning to that curriculum or being successful later on are diminished because we're taking them out of the general curriculum. Now, remember all those structures and supports that can be provided to make that general curriculum appropriate for individual students. So we've got lots of options here. But as we look at that, here's my frustration. I've been in education forever. I still see educators confusing the definition of these two terms. Accommodations versus modifications. I used to say when I trained many years back, I'd ask the audience to think of the meanest animal or insect in their city, in their country, in their state, whatever. And we came up with rattlesnakes in Texas, and I don't know what in San Francisco, for example, Julie. But put that between these two boxes, because you never want to modify, you never want to change what a student is learning if we can just change the way they access that learning. And that's what an accommodation is. That's my graphic organizer. That might be your text to speech. We have many students that are not reading on grade level, but cognitively fully understand the text. How fair is it to say, no, sorry, you have to read that 9th grade textbook when they fully understand that and more? That's a reading task, not the subject of science or social studies. So remembering the better we are at accommodating, the more successful the students are. So one is how, just changing how the student is learning versus what. Never, never remember the Texas rattlesnake between the two. You never want to go to the what unless if you have a how that you can make it easier to learn. Now, for example, in this chart, a student accesses text through audio digital version that he can see and hear at the same time. Is that an accommodation or a modification? Well, we need to say it's an accommodation. We didn't change anything about what he's learning. We just changed how he was learning it. Let's look at one more. The next slide is the student is only assessed on major concepts rather than all the content. Well, that's a modification. Let's look at remembering the difference between accommodations and modifications and how important they are. Now, my sixth issue here is the whole issue of behavioral concerns. We have to be careful about the number of students who are identified and sent down a hall to a behavior classroom on the basis of behavioral issues. Every school knows that we have to have a positive, preventative, proactive, school-wide positive behavioral support system. Sometimes adult emotionality about a student's misbehavior ends up with a referral for a child to go down the hall where he or she can major in other inappropriate behaviors. So this is a very, very important point here. We need to be careful that it's not expediency, because the segregation that results here is mind-boggling. So do we have, and I love this phrase, this is actually, I know this person. She's a principal who said, when a student doesn't know how to read, we teach him to read. When she doesn't know how to do math, we teach her how to add, or maybe we give her a calculator. But when a student doesn't know how to behave, we punish the student. We need to teach those positive behaviors. This is a wonderful Rachel's sister who's a principal to this day. Now, one of the things that we need to think about is moving from those random emotional strategies or referrals to installing systems that are those preventative, proactive. I often see when I walk into a quote unquote behavior unit, what's wrong with the system, not what's wrong with the students. Where are we missing out on serving the students? So I think that is where we still have a lot of work to do. Okay, one of my very favorites. But many people assume that when we're going to implement inclusion, we need a whole lot more staff. We need 10 more teachers because we all want to co-teach in every class. Well, let me tell you, in our experience, when you look at the needs of the student and then you look at the services that are required, and then you remember those different staffing models that I showed you, it was advanced support, in-class support, or specialized support. Many times we are overstaffing versus staffing appropriately. Now, by the way, I'm going to protect myself here. Don't get mad at me. If you feel that you're understaffed in your school for inclusion, perhaps you are. And if you are, you can document that because you have the needs of the student that need to be met in order for those students to be successful. But let me tell you, there's from this yesterday's continuum again, then we have to remember that this new set of continuums is more allocating the adults that we have in the school on the basis of the needs of students and not on the basis of places or labels. So here are 8 questions I love to ask when someone says, I need more staff, which often I hear it. Does the district have a system-wide process for objectively determining the staffing needs on the basis of student needs? I just conducted a focus group session for about 40 principals, and they had staff needs were not met. They had different models in every school. So when a child moved from the elementary school to the middle school, they don't even have the same vocabulary for staffing. They don't have a system-wide process for objectively determining the needs. I told them the other day that with that one fix, so they're consistent and objective, their decisions will be equitable and appropriate. Or are we asking for more staff because we don't own all kids? Are we saying that's not my child, he needs to go down the hall to the special ed class? because he doesn't belong in the general ed class. I'm a general ed teacher and I did not study special ed. Is that part of our problem? Do we request more staff because we don't have tier 1 instruction in our classroom? So we're really observing a lot of youngsters that are not able to be successful without good scaffolds, without good use of academic learning time, without the use of differentiated instruction. Are those things missing? Well, maybe we don't need more staff. We need to change the way we're teaching. Or are we asking for more staff because we are really providing inappropriate instructional strategies in a separate setting for special ed? It is not uncommon for me to go into a classroom down the hall that has a paraeducator right behind every chair. It's really the paraeducators conducting the work instead of the students. So are we not providing appropriate instruction in that classroom so that we don't have children leaving that setting and able to come back into the general ed classroom? Or do we have paraeducators that have had no training or minimal training and are not given correct directions by their supervising teacher? Well, then we're going to have a call from the school that say we need 4 more paraeducators next semester because we just need them. No, we're not effectively using the staff we have. We're not effectively and efficiently utilizing paras, which then results in more student dependency on paraeducators if we're not careful. Or do we have a cultural or climate issue in our schools where we have so many teacher vacancies in special ed that there's a lack of continuity of effective services? So students are starting completely over every time a new teacher or substitute walks in the class. Are we relying on adult proximity? Is that why we need more staff? Do we think we need to have a teacher or a paraeducator sitting next to Frances so she behaves rather than having engaging student instruction for the classroom? And very lastly, do we think we need more staff because the staff we have are not clear about their roles and how to perform them? Have we dropped the ball in terms of professional development? So those are 8 great questions that all have solutions. If you need staff, more staff, you should have them. And I'll help you do the bake sale or the garage sale. I'm kidding, but raise the money. If you need more staff, you need more staff, and you must have them. But how many times do we ask for more staff when that's not what we need to adjust in our school? I've mentioned this, so I'm not going to spend much time here, but this is one of our biggest concerns. Some time back, when we were having tight school budgets, somebody discovered that we could hire 2 paraeducators for the price of 1 teacher. And all of a sudden, across the country, we had double the paras and half the teachers. That was a critical mistake because paraeducators are fabulous. They're helpful. They're critical roles they play. They're very, very important to us, but they are not certified teachers. And we have to be very careful that we provide training to them in the roles that we're asking them to play. So just recently, within the last 10, 12, 15 years, the number of paras has increased significantly, and we have dropped the ball in training the supervising teachers. So significant changes. So these are some of the reasons that we have more paras than we need many times than we have teachers, or we have substituted one category of personnel for another. I am frequently in schools, this is scary, I hope this isn't your school, that says, oh, we do have inclusion. And our inclusion model is we send a paraeducator in the classroom when support is needed. They don't send any certified teachers into the special ed, into the general ed classroom. Well, there's that fabulous model of collaborative teaching. It's highly effective when needed and when appropriate, but that means 2 certified teachers. We are over-relying on paraeducators, in my opinion, instead of making the decision of what staff we need on the basis of what the student needs, not because we have a preconceived notion of inclusion means 1 general ed teacher and a paraeducator following the youngsters in the classroom when it's needed. That is a very small definition of what's possible or what you can provide in an inclusive classroom that doesn't meet all student needs. The last one we're going to talk about is something that, Julia, again, your examples are just gorgeous because they're really building an inclusive culture across your district. I still worry that I see that many times, still to this day, students with a disability may be like a visitor in the general ed class and not a member. And so we all need to pay close attention to how you build those social networks, how you build skills in all youngsters in addressing diversity that's a good thing and a healthy thing. And how do we build relationships across students and student groups? One of the things that I would tell you is a full definition of inclusion is there are 3 categories. You have to have all 3. You have to have physical inclusion. They need to be located as much as possible inside the general ed classroom. It's physical inclusion. Academic inclusion. Remember that part about children with disabilities shall have access to and opportunity to progress in the general curriculum. Academic inclusion. What are those strategies? And the other major benefit of inclusion in the category is social inclusion. Protecting against bullying, protecting against self-harm thoughts among students who have been bullied, left out, not included, or can I use my word that I started with, excluded. So let's return. I hope it's that you recognize that on this week of all weeks, the successes that you have in implementing inclusive practices. This country is doing a phenomenal job. When I started and begged the superintendents to allow children in those classrooms, and most often was told no, just before 94-140 Public Law 94-142 was passed, to today, when you do not deny any child that comes to your door access or services. And because we're becoming far more inclusive, we're more successful, we understand it, and we own it. Congratulations to all of you. I think it was a good little quick review of the things that some of our schools, we still have work to do. But where we are today is so far from where we were 50, 40, 30, 20 years ago that we have so much to celebrate. So thank you for joining the Inclusive Schools Week and participating in the activities that for you from your own district or your own school, because you are heroes to all of us. Thank you. And I'll turn it back to Julia.
Well, thank you, Frances. It's been an honor to be here today. And I think you must have been listening in to all the discussions because this is the work we are doing. Those challenges that you listed are challenges we see all the time. We have come very, very far from when my 23-year-old entered the school district all those years ago, when he was 3 and started getting involved in special education and getting services. What our families are experiencing now, the rights that they have, the expectation for inclusion, some of the talk of the Swift Center, that rightful presence, our parents are really looking to that future.
Yes.
And we still have a lot of old thinking that is around, and we slip back. We make moves. We try to make changes. And so it's so important to have this week in San Francisco. We call this our IEP for our district on inclusive practices, right? So it's a chance to absolutely celebrate all the beautiful things that we've done and to celebrate all of our students in really powerful and meaningful ways to them. And it's a chance to look forward and where do we want to be this time next year? What do we want to address? Because if we don't pay attention and we don't stay on top of these things and really critically analyze where we're at, we will slip back. It's easy to not pay attention and to lose those gains, and we cannot go back. We must go forward and continue celebrating inclusion. So thank you
Sure.
so much.
Thank you. Thank you.